Explain like I'm 5. How to add a field to Business Central. Hey, I'm Eric, and I know that I do a lot of videos where we do some crazy stuff and it writes a lot of code and it can get very technical. But a question that I have received many times is explain to me the simplest possible way. How can I add a field to my Business Central without any code fanciness and just as simple as possible? So that's the purpose of this video. So we're going to add a field to Business Central. We're going through all the steps, but keeping it as simple as possible without breaking anything. So with that in mind, let's get to it. Here is my Business Central, and this is my production environment for the fantastic company called Kronos Canada, right? And why do I know that this is my production? I can see it in the URL. There is either it says /production or it says nothing. So the first thing I want to do is that I want to make sure I have a sandbox. So you will never want to make changes directly in live in production. We want to make the change in sandbox, verify that it works the way you want it, and then you deploy it to production. We'll do that by the end of this video. So I hit the gear and I will go into my admin center. So the admin center is where you administer your Business Central. This is where you keep track of everything. And we can see here that I already have some sandboxes, no surprise. So I have my production environment and I have a sandbox called book, one called nset, and one called sandbox. I can try to hit the sandbox link and see if that one works. No reason why it shouldn't work. There we go. So this is a sandbox. We can see, and we can also see now that the name of the sandbox has come up on the top bar here. Okay, so that's the first requirement. We need a sandbox. Let's then define what kind of field do we want to add. Let's add a field to, I always go with customers, so let's add something to item this time. Let's add how about a date field for last counted, something like that. And to begin with, I would like that to be on the item card. So if I go in here and I look here, so I want to add it right here. The last card. Let's put it in the inventory section. So the last counted date. And the first thing we're gonna do here, because unfortunately we cannot just add a field. That would be lovely, but we can't. So we need to figure out where. And the way we do that is to turn on the page inspector. So you either open that from inspect pages and data here, or press Control Alt F1. And now we can see that we're on a page called the item card, and we're showing a table called item. And those two informations are very important. Also, let me just close the fact box for a second. We can see that we have the last field here is called over receipt code, and this is in the inventory section. So let's keep this on a tab so we know, because this is what this page now has all the information we need. So the next thing we need a tool, because we need to write. I was gonna say we gotta write some code, but in reality we need to define the field and where it should go. And the tool that we need to use is called Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code is just a glorified notepad that has the possibility of helping you edit tons of different files, and it can be very intimidating. So there's just like the screenshot they're showing here. If you're a developer, this looks pretty awesome, but if you're a non-developer, this looks quite scary. But I stumbled. What I'm trying to say is that don't be scared. Visual Studio Code is just like Notepad with some extra functionality, and we choose that extra functionality. So we can install it here, download for Windows, because I'm on Windows. If you're on a Mac, you download for Mac, and so on. You install it and then you run it, and I have already installed it, so I'll just open it up, and here's mine. You can see mine is slightly bluish compared to the screenshot here, because I have chosen to install some different colors in mine. And since I'm looking at this all day, these are the colors that I like to look at. So now I have this. This is awesome. But again, this is just Notepad. We can type, we can do editing stuff here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to tell Visual Studio Code that we need to teach it what is known as AL, the language of Business Central. Not because we're gonna really write any real code here, but because we need to have Visual Studio Code to be able to talk to Business Central. And the way that is done is through the little Tetris game logo on the side here. And what we want to find is AL language. So if you search for AL language, you will find this guy. I already have it installed, so I have an uninstalled here. You will see I think it's green, like all the things that I have not installed here. So you will click install on that, and seconds later, your Visual Studio Code is ready to do your bidding. So I'll close this again. And I will see, we actually started here, that there was nothing on the screen. So what I want to do now is that I want to go up in the menu. So there's a menu up here that looks like any other menu, but there's a little menu item called the command palette. And this is where you can ask Visual Studio Code to do things. And what I want to do is very simple. There's a command called ALGO. Either you can, if it's, as you see, I have it on screen because I have used it recently. If it's not on screen, you can type AL and ALGO, and then it will find it for you. So click on that. Now you're asked to please choose a path to a new empty folder. And this is slightly confusing, because does that mean that you should go ahead and create a folder? No. It means that please enter the path name of a folder that you don't have on your system. And you can see this one goes to user Eric documents, and then a folder called AL, and then AL project 7. But I want to call this my single field. Yeah, my single field. That's a good name. So I type that. So there's no, and this is one of the quirks of of Visual Studio Code, there's not really a dialog that will come up. So here you need to make sure that you type where you want it to go and remember where that is, or just use what it suggests you. Then the next question is, what version of Business Central are you using? So if you're in the cloud, you just choose the top one, the largest one. But if you're running on-prem, you might want to use some of the other ones. And if you're down here below 4.0, I suggest you get a new version of Business Central. That's another video, another discussion. So I'll just go with the 6.0. So these versions are totally confusing. So Nav 2018 was version 0. And now we're at 6, and version 7 is coming out in a week, no, 2 weeks, something like that. Also known as version 18. So there's multiple version numbers here, and it's totally confusing for everybody, including Microsoft at times I've seen. But just go with the top one. Now it just disappeared up here, and then it asks a new question, and the question it asks now, please choose the server. And what does that mean? That means, what Business Central are we talking with? Are we talking with a cloud sandbox, or are we talking with a on-prem server? So Visual Studio Code can talk to both of them. In this case, we have a cloud sandbox. That was we verified that it works. So we want to use the Microsoft Cloud Sandbox. And we can see that now we got a strange looking file on the screen. This file is called the launch.json. JSON is not a name. JSON is a file format where you can store data in. And in this case, we can see that we have something called configurations. And inside the configuration, there is something that has a name called Microsoft Cloud Sandbox, request launch, type AL, environment type sandbox, and a whole bunch of stuff in here. So the important part is environment name. So what environment, if we go back to, we already downloaded, so we're good. So if we go back to our admin center, we have different environments. So I choose to use the environment called sandbox. So I don't have to change anything in the file here, because this is already the file that it already says sandbox. So we're good. If I were to use book or nset, well, oops, sorry, let's switch on. Then I would go in here and say that I need to talk to the sandbox called book. But I'm not. We're using sandbox. That's okay. And you can do other fancy things in this file, but we don't care. So we just leave this file as is. So let's close it. Now we can see that on the left side, a list of files has opened, and launch.json, that was the one that we had on screen. We already saw that. The other one is called app.json, and app.json is a file that defines all the stuff you do. This is what you'll see when you open up extension management. So if we are going back into our Business Central, now we can check our production environment. Extension management. So in here in our production environment, I can go and see what apps do I have installed. And I have installed apparently some tax stuff, and Bank of Canada app, and that's pretty much it. If I go into and look at my sandbox, I might have a different set of extensions in the sandbox. It doesn't have to match what you have in the different environments. I have eFocus protocol, the advanced account schedules, and the SharePoint connector. I think that's it. But what you create will show up in here, and you can see there's a description, which is not the description, that's the publisher, but I don't know why it's called description. And then a name and a version, and that's pretty much it. So that matches what we have here. So we have a name, and we'll just go with my single field, and in the publisher instead of default publisher. That sounds so mediocre. That's no, I will say that is me. Always sign when you're doing something. And we have a version. A version, you need to, whenever you make a change and put, so in video number 2, if we wanted to make a change and deploy that again, we need to increment the version. And what does increment the version mean? Well, you could go with after version 1 comes version 2, after version 2 comes version 3, and so on. Or you could increment after version 1.000 come 1.001. There are many ways of doing this, and the only requirement there is that this one has to be incremented. So the new version has to be bigger than the previous one. So some just choose to increment this one until some very big numbers. Others put a meaning saying what version of Business Central are you using, and the main version of your app, and what week did you publish in, and some build number for your fancy build server and all that. But that doesn't matter. So as long as you increment, that's the only real demand there is here. The other numbers, or not other fields in here are, some of them might be useful at some point, but now we just totally ignore them. What we can also see is that we have, so let's close this again. We had one more field called one more file called Hello World. Hello World is just a stupid little example of something that we'll just delete it, go away. So now we have 2 files. But the first thing we need to do is make sure that we do have a connection to our sandbox. So after we have the 2 files, we'll go back up to the command palette, and then we'll find something called AL download symbols. And what does that mean? That means, let's try it out here, that let's see, this one got mad at me. So this might be because, and now I'm just totally gonna do one thing just to make it because this should, if you only have one Business Central, you don't care about what I'm doing now. But if you have more than one, if you're in the biz, I need to tell that this is the tenant I'm using, so I get the right Business Central. Let me try again to see if this works better. I go to the command palette. Now we can see that the command I just used is here in the recently used, so I'll do the download symbols. And the first thing that happens now is that to sign, and this is behind my head, so let me actually move my head just for a moment here. I'm up there now. So to sign in, use a web browser to open the page, something with device login, and enter the code RWN6NZ to authenticate. So this is a weird way of logging in, but this is how it works. So I'll click copy and open. And I get a a login screen. Let me just put myself back in the corner. I get a login screen here, kind of a login screen, but remember it said copy and open. So in my clipboard now, I have that weird code. So I can paste that in here, type next, and it tells me that you're signing into Dynamics 365 Developer on another device located in Canada. Well, this is me. I will use my account, and I'm now signed in. So what happens if we go back here is that now this one is working, and Symbols has been downloaded. You can see behind my head, or you can see part of it behind my head. And we got a new folder up here. This new folder is all the stuff that's in your Business Central, at least some of it, most of it. And what all this is, it doesn't really matter, but this is a description of what's in Business Central. And now we are ready to actually add our fields. Now we have done all the preparation work. And what we've done here is, this is the same preparation work if you want to program a big custom solution, or or you just want to add a field like we did in this case. So I'll just collapse this one again. And this is the scary spot, because now I kind of have the blank canvas. So what should I do now? And the secret is that we need to add a file. So we can go over here, and I'll right click, and I'll choose a new file. And we can give it a name, and we can call it new item field. And then it's very, very, very important that we call this .al. So remember that we installed the AL language here. And for that to figure out something is AL, the file has to be .al, just like a Word document has to be .doc or .docx, and the same thing with an Excel file has to be XLS or XLSS, and so on. In order for Notepad to open something, it simply has to be .txt. But in order for this one for Visual Studio Code to figure out that this is AL, you have to name the field .al. So now we are so that was the first scary moment. That was, we have to create a file. So now that we have the open file, that's the next scary moment. So what can we do here? And Visual Studio Code can actually help, but it's not very obvious that it can help. So, but if I take my 2 index fingers and do Control Space, I get a list of what Business Central, what Visual Studio Code thinks is appropriate to put in this exact spot. And if we go back to, close this one and go back to our sandbox, then remember where we were, that the page inspector told us that we were on table item and page item card. This is where we want the field. So let's go back here and say, okay, the concept, the only concept that we're really gonna use here is called an extension, and extension is now an overused term. So we are creating an extension. But what we're doing here, and we can see if we go scroll down here, scroll, I can find something called a table extension. So table is the techie term for the database part. So what I want to do is that I want to create a table extension. So I want to extend, in this case, I want to extend the item table. So we have the page and the table. I'm starting with the table because I need to add the field to the database before I can add the field to the screen. Because if we start saying let's add a field to the screen, but it's not in the database, then we're at a halt. So we have to start by putting the field in the database, and we do that by creating a table extension. So I type table extension, or select table extension, and then I get the red line saying this is an error. Ignore that. I type a space, and then it's only a little error. For some reason, now the N is an error. Also ignore that. What we want to do now is, again, let's use the control space, and it will suggest a number, which is great because everything behind the scene in Business Central is numbered. Very, very old thing. Again, if you go back and we look at the page inspector, we can see that the item card is actually number 13, and the item table is actually number 27. And if we look here behind, that's behind my head, we can see that number 2 field is actually field number 2. We can take the inventory posting group, that's field number 11. So everything is actually numbered behind the scene. As long as the number is below 50,000, that's Microsoft. If it's between 50,000 and 100,000, that's you, or a developer doing something for you. If it's above 100,000, then it's either an app or a Microsoft supplied app or something like that. So the space you have, the room where you can play and do whatever you want, is from 50,000 to 99,999. So this one is suggesting 50,100, and the reason it's suggesting that, which is fine, perfectly fine, is that in the app.json, the stuff that we ignored earlier actually defined the range of our stuff. So if you want to be somewhere else in the range, you change the range in here, but we don't mind. It doesn't matter right now. So now the error has gone on table extension. Now the number I just put in is an error, and ignore that. I add a new space, and I will create this one and call it my item fields. And then we can see this becomes strange because I use space in here, and spaces are confusing in stuff like that. So what I need to do is that I need to put double quotes around this. So see, now everything's an error here, which is okay, because we can try to figure out what is the error by holding the mouse over it, and we get a whole bunch of errors. But the first one says that extends expected. And this is exactly what we need to do. So we need to tell that, okay, this table extension, 50,100, my item field extends. And then we need to tell it what to extend. And now we use the same clever trick, control space, and suddenly we get a list. And we get a very, 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 very long list. These are all the tables that are in Business Central. Actually, all this information came from those symbols that we just downloaded. So now Visual Studio knows everything there is to know about your Business Central. Thankfully, this list is searchable. So we'll type item, and we can see already that's the first suggestion after I typed IT. And I select that, and we remember that was the name of the item table. So most tables in Business Central are actually named meaningful. So this is quite easy. And again, now this is an error. It's not an error, but it's kind of, it's saying that it needs something. This one is an error because you are missing something. So what we need to do now is I press enter and I do a curly bracket here. And I get by typing the open one, also get the close one. And see what I did, old habit was I I pressed enter. Let's try to do that again. Let's try to do that again. So I go down here and I type the curly bracket and then I press enter. And you see now the cursor is moved in, which is a common way of trying to organize text field, because right now we're just in Notepad. Remember, this is just Notepad. We're writing some text, but we got the control space to help us. And it's very common in any computer language, to use indentation to kind of show the structure. So now we're back to the issue what to write now. I can do the control space again, and we can see there's a bunch of stuff we can do here now. So we can really change a table and extend it, but we just want to add a field. So what we'll do is that we'll select the fields. And now it says that there's an error here because this is not what we're expecting at this point. We're expecting another open curly. So now you can see now we have a pattern here, that we have a table extension with something after it and then curly brackets, then we says field with another set of curly brackets. So the curly brackets kind of define what's in this one. And now we get to the juicy part, because what we can do in here is that we can either do field or modify. Modify will change an existing field. We're not going to do that. So we're going with field. And I pressed a parenthesis begin. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, I press control space again. You can see there's a lot of suggestions that start with a T. That's a snippet. So a little example of how it could look. So if I type T field, I get a little list of what should be here, even though the suggestions are terrible because blob. Yeah, anyway. So what I can do here is that I can remove the ID, use my good friend control space again and select a number, because a field has a number. So you need to use your own number series also for the field numbers. Then it's the name of the field. And remember what we had with the spaces up here in the quote. So I'll just type a quote to begin with. And then I'll do last counted. And I can move to the type of the field. And this can be complicated. So we do control space again. We can see there's a bunch of types here. And some of them are obvious what they do, others are strange. What you can do if you are in Business Central, and then let me actually just make sure that this is not behind my head. Come on, Business Central. Come on, browser, perhaps. Why is this hard? There we go. So you can see here, right next to my head, is that if we look at different fields that we can see, statistics group, that's an integer. Allow invoice discount, that's a Boolean. Let's see if we have anything with dates in here. I can't remember if there's actually a date fields on the item. Last date modified. You see, that's a date. So we wanted a date. So the data type we need is a date. If this were a, see if we go back up and then we look at we look at code, which is kind of a text. So the item number is a code and the description is a text. So there's two different text fields, one called code and the other one is called text. Code is always uppercase and is used for codes. Otherwise it's text. So if what we want to do is simply do date, and that's it. If we wanted to add a text, we can see that we get an error again. The scary one. The maximum length. Well, what is actually the error should be is that you have not specified the length, and you specify the length by doing square brackets. It says 100. So this is a text field of 100 characters. All text field has to have a maximum length in the database because you allocate space. Anyway, we want to do a date. So what we need to do here, so I'm going to press enter and then I'm going to select one called Caption. And even though I'm just going to use the same caption as the field name, this is still a proper way of doing it. Potentially later you can change the caption, but the field name can never be changed. So now we have a new field in the database, which is great, but we still need to put it on the screen. And there's two ways of doing this, and I'm just gonna use one of them. One way is that we create another file. So new item card AL. But I could also just use the same file for it. A lot of people do prefer that we create more than one file, so we keep everything in separate files. In this case, this is more or less the same. So let me actually run through it before this video gets way too long. So now we want to extend the page, and remember we were on the item card here. So I'm going to do a page extension and new, I'll call it field on item card, and you see then I still need to extend, and this time I'm going to do control space and I'm typing item card. So now we're doing a page extension, and but it's still the same syntax as what we did here. Go down, I do the curly brackets, and now it's, you think it would be fields. That could make a lot of sense because it's fields on the screen, but that's not what it's called when you're on a page. It's called layout. And I do the curly brackets again, so you see that's the exact same thing. So what can we do here? You can see that these are sort of navigational. Add after, add before, add first, add last. Let's forget about modify. Move after, move before, move first, move last. So we want to add something. So that is clearly one of the add function. And I'm gonna do add first right now. Then we're going to do parentheses. Then it's ask for an anchor. I do control space because I'm and then we can see that there's a bunch of stuff. Some of them are named, so you've cost detail, cost and printing, or cost and posting. Some of them make sense. Others are control 61 and control 64, and there's no way of figuring out what's what. So find an anchor that you make that makes sense. In this case, there's an anchor called InventoryGrp, and my guess is that this is the InventoryGrp. This is a group kind of thing. So at first, so first in InventoryGrp, and now it's actually called field again. So we want to add a field. And then it asks for name and an expression, which is weird, but forget about that. Use your friend, control space. And then you can see suddenly there are lots of fields. But remember that we called our new field last counted. And then we get some blue lines here, which is that you should really type rec dot in front of this, and we'll do that. At some point, I guess Microsoft will start prefixing here. And you can see we have the squiggly line under the closer one again, so that means that we probably need to add something more. And in here, this is weird, but we need to add one line that says ApplicationArea equal all. Otherwise, nobody will actually see this field. Okay, so now we're done. So we have typed 13 lines, most of them are squiggly lines. In this one, we have typed 11 lines. In this one, most of them squiggly lines. So now I'm going to, normally I would just press F5 in a video like this, but since we're trying to be thorough and not doing something, we want to do AL let's see, publish with debugging. Or we can do publish without debugging. What is debugging? Debugging is that if you want to see code is running, then you can see the code is running, but we have no code. We just added a field. So we'll just do publish without debugging. And now all sorts of stuff happens. You can see here's another, when we download the symbols, we got one dialog. Now we're getting it that we need to authenticate again. And this time it's not copy and open, unfortunately. So I'm going to select this one, copy, and then I'm going to do control click on this one to get into the browser. I paste this code and I'm still logged in as me. And now you're logged in. And we go back and we might get this one more time. Yeah, this is, I don't know why. So I do the exact same thing again. I copy it and I log in. And now you have signed in. So now we can see stuff happening here. And what's happening is that, and it was pretty fast. So what happens is that what we built got compiled. And what does compile mean? Compile means that it's checking that there's no obvious errors in what you have written, and it's building the app file. Then it's sending that app file to the Microsoft server. The Microsoft server opens up the app file and compiles it again and does whatever the app, what instructions are in the app. So, and then it was nice enough to open a browser for me. It actually opened on customers because if you remember the file I had here, launch, and I'll get rid of this one. You can see that there's a startup object ID. Again, everything has numbers, and 22 is the customer list. But we are interested in items. And here are my items. So now I open the item card. And look and behold, here is the last counted. And we can see that this is a date field with a proper calendar and everything. So we have added a field to Business Central. I know this video is now 43 minutes long by now, but the idea was to explain it very thoroughly. So before we end the video, let's go back to extension management and look what we have accomplished. No, actually, we need to deploy this to production. So we can see now here that my single field is now in my sandbox. That's awesome. So now I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code. And before I take my app file here, I need to do one more thing. And I will go back up to the command palette. And there is a command called AL generate permission set containing current extension objects. I click that and I get an extra file over here. This one is XML for some reason. And right now it's more or less empty, but you should always, you can get kicked out of not be allowed to deploy to a production environment if you do not have a permission set for the extension. So that we have now. So now I really don't need to deploy to my sandbox again. So I'm just gonna go to the command palette once more, and I think there is what is called package. I think it's not AL package. So AL package will just create the package, aka the app file. So what I need to do now is that I need to go to my production environment, and now I'm in the extension management still. So I can go here and say upload extension, and I need to upload. This was users, Eric, documents, AL. And what did we call it? We call it my single field, and I select the app file. This is very small on your screen. I'm so sorry about that. I select that. I accept the whatever I accept, but I accept it, and then it says deploy. And now this screen, extension deployment in progress. Please check the deployment status page for updates. So what we can do is that we can go to the deployment status up here, and we can see that I have done other things. So right now my single field upload is in progress. I can press F5 a couple of times to see when Microsoft is picking this app file up. And it usually goes that I press F5 until I get impatient and press escape. And when I press escape, it will show up here in an instance. And sometimes this can take a few minutes, depending on how busy Microsoft is. Now, there you go. Upload completed. And what does upload mean? Well, upload means that this is now in our system. So now I'm in production, C/nothing, there's no name here. And the administrator has made a change to the system that requires you to restart the activity. Okay, so let's do that. So I copied the URL, and let's just close all these browser tabs and restart again. And I have not tried collections. I don't care about collections right now. Good evening, Eric. I go to items. I go to the item card, and I have my new field here. That's it. So that is how you are getting started with customizing your Business Central. This is how you are adding a field. What we could do is we could add another page extension if we wanted this field on the item list also, or somewhere else where the item table is used. But that would simply mean that we would add another a little text field, text file to our project, to our little extension. But that's how you add a field to Business Central. This can be done in less than 5 minutes if you're quick and don't have to talk all the time while you're doing it. But I hope this helped, and I hope, really hope that this helped getting over this is weird and complicated. I will leave the small pieces of code that I have written. I'll leave them in the description below, so you can copy paste them, or you can look at them there if that will help. Then until next time, have a wonderful day.